Do you ever notice that maybe you feel a little bit needy, or that you do things because you have this craving because something's missing? Well, today I want to talk to you about 3 basic needs that we all needed growing up as children for our development in order to feel strong, safe, secure, confident, most of all, and in alignment with our passion, power, and purpose. So I want to go through the 3 and then provide you strategies with how you can cultivate those needs if they weren't met when you were a child. So let's get started. The first one is the need for safety. So growing up, it's really important that we are around parents that have regulated nervous systems and teach us how to do that. That, we feel that we can be held, that there's no physical violence or abuse, that it's a predictable environment and that there's consistent caregivers. All of these things create safety. Some other things are, actually being held, being physically held and feeling safe when that's happening. The other piece with that is the need for love, because when we feel safe, it's easier to feel loved. And what that looks like is that our parents actually want us. We know. We don't just feel it, we know that they want us, that we are the most important thing to them, that they just adore us, and that we're just this awesome person in their life, and that we feel really endeared by them. That's another aspect. And that most of all, the love is unconditional. I don't think that happens very often. At least I can't speak for it in my experiences and a lot of people that I know. So it needs to be unconditional, because then we change the way we are to be loved, because we're not being accepted for who we are. So the third one is the need for boundaries. Now this one I found interesting when I learned about this, and that is where, parents are actually saying no. It's important for parents to say no, because that creates safety. We know what the expectations are, because if there's no boundaries at all, then we're not safe. So they all kind of interconnect, these 3 basic needs. The boundaries do, though, need to be flexible, because if they're too rigid, there's too much control, and then, what happens? That creates unsafety, and then not feeling loved and free, right? And that there is definite follow through, they're consistent, that's also important, and that there's this sense of, that you have this inner strength that you can go do things, but within limits. So those are the 3 areas that really help create confident children who then become confident adults in their power and in alignment. If that doesn't happen, well, what happens? It impacts us a lot. And so, for example, when things happen, like let's say, for example, a breakup, if that need for love wasn't met, that breakup just destroys you, okay? Or for example, if that need for safety wasn't met and you have some financial stress, it really, really affects you, because there's a sense of unsafety. The other one, boundaries, for example, well, if there were no boundaries, then a person has a hard time committing and being consistent with things. The other thing that happens is your inner world is affected. So for example, if you didn't grow up in a safe space, then the world becomes a scary place. If you didn't have the love that you needed unconditionally, well, you're not lovable. And then maybe there's anxious attachment, maybe there's avoidant attachment. And then lastly, if those boundaries were not met, then there's this sense of, I can't do it. And I'm afraid that I'll hurt others or that they'll hurt me. So it really impacts the way you think, your points of view, your behavior, and guess what? It creates clutter in your life. Surprise, surprise. So I want to quickly go through each one and give one example of how it shows up more specifically, and then ways that you can cultivate it. So the first one, as I mentioned, is safety. And that's really avoiding going out of your comfort zone. You attempt to control people around you and your environment. It could also look like self-medicating and drugs to kind of calm your nervous system to feel safe, because there's that over active fight or flight sense because there isn't this sense of safety. So then there's these different coping mechanisms to feel safe and calm that nervous system down. And so that could sound like, I can't do this, I'm a failure, only other people know how to do this, nobody else knows how to do this. I'm the only one who knows how to do it properly, that sense of control. And then around the drug use, possibly, it could be, I can't handle this. So all these I can't, or they can't, right? So it's a sense of control, this need for safety, and just not being able to be present and confident in your power. And how that shows up as clutter is everything is not being able to let go of things because of what if, doing everything yourself because no one else can do it properly, that need for control, but then there's no time for self-care and everything piles up. And then that need for safety and just trying to calm that nervous system down, well then can't really be conscious and present and get things done. So then again, things pile up. So let's look at the next one, the need for love. And when that one's not being met, it looks like obsessing over appearance. And that is, I'm not lovable if I don't change myself. Lots of shopping that creates clutter, lots of clothing, just anything to look perfect. The other one is rejecting others before they reject you. That's quite common because it's like, well, I don't like them anyways. That protection because that fear of being rejected. And then what happens is perfectionism creeps in and, constantly just obsessing over certain things, and then other things don't get done, which then creates clutter. And then the last one is choosing unkind partners. And it's like, I don't deserve to be loved. And then what happens? End up being in codependent relationships and end up being in very toxic situations where you're not in alignment and not in your power. So the other area that I mentioned is the boundaries. And with the boundaries, how that looks is, well, overtraining someone's body. Like this obsession to work out because there's a need to feel strong and to look strong because a person feels weak because they didn't have those healthy boundaries growing up. And then they spend excessive amounts of time doing this and the rest of their life just kind of is chaotic and crazy. The other one is that lack of self-discipline and I can't do this, it's never going to happen. And so then there's a lot of procrastination. Again, the piles continue to pile up and then the person cannot keep up. Another one is someone just being cruel, okay? And they don't have to work as hard as me. And there's this resentment because there's this bitterness and victimhood around the situation. And they're a complete sense of denial of trying to be able to do anything about the situation because that person doesn't have the confidence to stand up and take charge of their life because there were no healthy boundaries to help the individual and the child feel that sense of self. So that's a lot, and that's pretty much most people experience bits and pieces of all of those three areas and all those three needs not being met. So what can you do? Lots. One, you can release the trapped emotions through different techniques like EFT tapping and emotion code, which I've talked about. You can cultivate those needs yourself because they weren't developed when you were younger and can't go back in the past. So creating safety, you can learn to calm your nervous system down, doing different techniques. You can connect with the feelings in your body and release that fear and reprogram the brain to go, wait a second, I actually am safe now. And then you can learn how to reset by slowly, incrementally challenging yourself in different situations so that you go outside of your comfort zone and build that confidence as well, which helps with the boundaries and the self-love. And so to cultivate the love, it's doing things where you work on your relationship with yourself. What are you telling yourself? How can you change that story? How can you tune into your superpowers and why you're here and your soul purpose? How can you cultivate that? How can you make time for that? And then how can you be curious and compassionate towards yourself instead of beating yourself up? How can you get support around that? Who are people in your life who can support you with that? Can you work with a coach or a therapist to do that? And then, of course, just tuning in and just saying love. I love you, and getting into that daily practice and rewiring those old stories that are not true. The last one is cultivating boundaries. It's really important to go, okay, where do I need to say no? Where am I not standing in my power that I need to kind of stand in my power and say no? And just kind of knowing the difference of and discerning like when to give to others and when to give to yourself. Because a lot of the time people end up being people pleasers or they shut everyone out. So being able to have that giving and receiving cycle in a way where you're still setting boundaries and doing your self-care. And of course, being flexible with those boundaries and noticing if you're being too rigid or if you don't have any at all. And lastly, how can you rewrite your story? I heard that for many years and I'm like, what does that even mean? How can you write a story about who you actually are now? How did those past experiences and those needs not being met create who you are now and the person that you want to be? What did you learn from all of that? And what are you going to carry with you moving forward? So I hope you found that helpful. I'll definitely put the information in the description below. And remember to like and subscribe if you want to get more inspiration on how you can get back into alignment and into your passion, power, and purpose. And check out my free alignment call if you want to learn more about how you can do that, as well as upcoming courses. Anxiety and the Clutter Creates is the current one, and you can check that out and email me as well for more information. Thank you, and until next time.